Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. We'll see if a few more folks join. Thank you, Phil, for throwing on your screen. But welcome, everyone, to Wealth Building. Should really be called Wealth Building Basics. Today, we're not going to go too deep into specific examples of opportunities, and that is a class that I'm working on for April. But wealth building, basics is really a lot to do with mindset and preparation. And so in today's half hour, what we're going to run through, we're going to go through the vision gold, the fundamentals, the tools, the wealth building opportunity, things to remember, and then ahas at the end, and definitely some Q&A if anyone has any questions or has anything they want to share. It's a perfect time to jump in during the presentation if you like, or certainly afterwards if there are any questions. I will stay around and share with you. All right. So as with anything, money, fitness, it's a long-term vision. And so a lot of those things will outlive any level of motivation that you could possibly have. And so you really have to come up with a big reason of what's going to keep you accountable and what is going to make sure that you show up through the difficult times and that you will repeat the often boring, mundane habits that are in wealth building that are effective in reducing your spend and increasing your wealth. And so a lot of that comes from really figuring out why are you doing it. And so I can only speak for myself, but wealth building and talking about money was certainly not something that was, something my family taught me or that was even comfortable. We certainly never spoke about money at the table, and it definitely didn't feel like we came from wealth. And so it was in many ways foreign to me. I always just thought, you go to school, you get a job, and somehow magically some people all look like they're retiring and people look like they're having fun along the way. But then as life progresses, you realize, there are people that are doing better and there are people that are doing less effectively. And a lot of it is not directly tied to simply the amount of money someone makes, but it's the steps and the methods, the habits that they employ into their world. And a lot of it comes from finding your, again, big why. And don't let that stress you out. Like perhaps if you're operating right now from a place of catching up or a place of negative cash flow or a negative net balance, there are tons of people that have, done incredible accomplishments in 5+ years. And that is always a takeaway that I try and make people understand, that we often overestimate what we can get done in 1 year and underestimate what can be accomplished in 5 years. But if you're at a point where you're either wanting to double down and make progress from your positive steps that you put in so far into wealth building, welcome. And otherwise, if you are at a place where you want to fix your financial situation and get into wealth building as a long-term positive habit, welcome as well. Both of you can do it, and there's tons of time ahead. A way of approaching it is really figuring out what is your someday goal. And so be as specific as you can be. It's not just to say, I want to retire at a specific age. It would be very helpful to figure out what do you, one moment here.
We have a flasher.
We have a flasher.
You should be able to kick them out permanently.
Pretty easy. Interesting that is a fun thing for people to do. All right. Welcome back, everyone. So the focus is really getting clear on what your someday goal is and getting, as clearly as you can transcribe that to yourself. You can document it. It's not having, a vacation house. It's where is it? What does it look like? How much resources will you need to be able to purchase it, and what are all the other variables that you'll be doing at that point? And so getting really, really clear with your someday goal will allow you to to understand how much it will cost to service that opportunity, because everyone's goal, everyone's vision has a different cost to it. And so that's the really cool part, and that's also a comforting part, because it gives you more time to build towards it. So design what your someday goal is, break it down into your 5-year goal. Again, the 5 year is a magical point in time in the future where I've seen, incredible things achieved in 5 years. I've seen people completely change where they were and accomplish things that felt like should take a lifetime in a 5 year window. Breaking it down from there, more specifically to your 1 year goal, your monthly, your weekly, and what are you willing to do today? What are you willing to do once you get off this Zoom? What are steps towards financial wealth building that you can apply based on what you learned today that will put you in the right direction? Once you have clarity on setting your goals, you're going to have to, figure out what activities will you need to do in order to achieve those goals. The big thing about writing down your goals is that we all have heard that writing down goals is a recipe for success. And in fact, you are nearly 50% more likely to accomplish your goals when you write them down. And then the step beyond that is creating an accountability system in your world where you have, either a coach or people that you hire or people that you meet with who will hold you accountable, that understand what your goals are and are going to call you out when you're deviating from those goals and when you're allowing your perhaps, regular habits that you already have that aren't the most positive get in the way of your wealth building goal. All right. It's really, really simple. So the fundamentals of wealth building is money in minus money out equals your profit. And then you invest your profit. When you do that successfully, you're creating wealth. And tracking your wealth through a net worth tracker is something we're going to talk about. It's one of the most simple things in life, same as, fitness or losing weight. We understand how it's done, and yet so many of us struggle at achieving it because it may be simple, but it's not easy. And in there lies the challenge. A lot of times when you have, all the different options available, when you have all the different things that are pulling at you, you often fall back to your regular habits that haven't been helping you in the wealth building department. And so keep that in mind, that you're not going to have an aha moment of discovering something that no one else knows or that's a secret. It's more, what are the proven steps that other people are completing that are producing results. And so one of those things is you need a personal budget. And if you haven't done it for a long time, you need to commit to tracking a personal budget for a year. You also need to do that for your business. Doing it less than that allows the person who's tracking themselves to kind of cheat or be unrealistic, and not consciously cheat. But what you do is if you're only tracking your expenses, for example, for a month or two, you naturally hold off some spending, or you might have best practices for a month or two. But if you're going to do it for a year, you will really understand what your natural challenges are and what your true spend is. And from there, you can constantly be tweaking it and, figuring out where is the opportunity. You want to go through all your credit card and bank statements. It's amazing how many times you will discover that there are things on there that you can't figure out what the charge is. There are, especially in today's world, there are apps and there are different small programs and different things that are charging us, $10, $30 a month, even more, that we're not getting the value from or that we thought we had canceled. There's a real opportunity, if you haven't done personal budgeting in a while, to really cut out 15% of your costs right away. I would say it's often very easy to get to 5 to 8% by just eliminating things that you've forgotten about. And then it's that extra 5 to 8% to get to that 15 that allows you to figure out, are these things really important to me, right? Like, are you finding that you're getting skip the dishes sent to you, but you're really, forcing yourself to eat half of them, or you're throwing away half the salads because the lettuce is wilting by Sunday. And so it gives you the opportunity to get more clear with your spend and more, clear with yourself about what your priorities are. And a lot to do with wealth building is saying no. It's saying no to things that you may want to do, but it's not a big enough opportunity for the money that you're spending on it, especially in the environment that we're currently living in. I think, a lot of wealth building is entirely tied to saying no. A little known fact is that over 75% of the millionaires in North America made less than $100,000 a year. And so a lot of the wealth that was created in the past was not created by people making, large salaries. In fact, that can often be one of the downfalls, because there's the expense creep that happens when um, when you're making a salary and you feel that you've earned it and you want to reward yourself, that it's very hard to pull back and not let your expenses increase proportionately to what you're making. All right, so increasing your money, the concept there that we'll talk about is doubling down on the top 20% that is working and generating more, leads and more sources of revenue. And we've talked about that, and we'll talk about that in the future class about all the different methods of generating wealth that are out there once you have savings to apply. One of the most simple things, and I'd love for you to use it as a takeaway if you're currently not doing it, is to track your net worth. I started actively doing this about 18 years ago. I was in a negative position after student loans and university and college. And so, my net worth position was a negative. And the cool part about that is, of course, you want it to be a positive, but by tracking the negative month after month, you see it reducing, and eventually you hit the point where you're no longer in the black, or in the red, you're in the black, and that is kind of a cool point. And then beyond that, it's really exciting to see that those moments where you said no to people, those moments where you made a decision to save money or earn more money, are tracking themselves, are adding up. And so one way of doing that is by systemically and systematically every month having a day and an hour that you set aside where you're going to go through and just again repopulate the worksheet from the month before, fill in all the different categories from your short-term credit, your short-term debt, your long-term credit, and your long-term debt. And then it spits out what your full position is, what you're worth, so to speak. And then it compares that to your previous month. And so for a lot of people, that is the rewarding numbers that you can see, where you can notice that over the last 30, 31 days, your activities caused a positive net worth to be accumulating in your world. All right. So the other thing that we spoke about is budget. And again, hopefully you're listening to this simple presentation at a point in time where you're willing to take one or two activities, one or two concepts, and apply them. Because I can guarantee you almost everything that I'm talking about today, you'll have heard before. And yet, if you're at the right point in time and willing to apply and perhaps an old activity or even a new activity, doing it at the right time and being committed to it makes all the difference. And so we talked about tracking your wealth or your net worth position. And then this is a very simple budget that has your personal expenses and your business expenses, and tracking that monthly, really writing down at the end of the month all the different and categorizing and adding it up, all the different expenses you had in both, allows you a few things. One, you get clarity on how much your world costs. It also, if you're, an entrepreneur, realtors like many of us on the Zoom, it allows you to get real with yourself. And yes, we're very good at coming up with variable expenses as a realtor that we can justify. We can justify the meal, the drink, the different activities, because it's client relationship, it's lead gen, it's any of those things. But when you see it on paper, you really get an understanding of what it's costing you. And you can ask yourself, is it worth it? Is it a scalable, repeatable, maintainable thing that is offering enough value in my world that I want to keep it? Or is there an opportunity to pull back and again, use it in a way of reducing my expenses by that targeted 15%? When you have that big why that we spoke about, what you want to do towards actually having progress is figuring out, how will you get there? And so a really simple framework that I've shared many times, and it can be used for so many different applications, from, figuring out how you're going to climb Kilimanjaro to figure out how you're going to double your business, and is always coming up with what that, overarching goal is, what the purpose and the vision of your effort is leading into, coming up with 3 clear priorities that when accomplished, you've structured them that success will be achieved, and then all the different strategies or action steps, so to speak, underneath each priority that you have to accomplish. And so, for example, just off the top of my head, if your goal was to, pay off a certain amount of debt, maybe priority number 1 is cost cutting a certain amount of your expenses. Priority number 2 could be figuring out a way of generating 10% more income if you're in a salary job. Priority three could be figuring out a side hustle that you can do and generate a certain amount of extra cash flow to reach your big goal of paying off a big number. By drawing it out, again, it makes it a lot more realistic and a lot more likely that you will achieve that goal. So the wealth building opportunity, I think, beyond controlling your expenses and beyond, really getting clear on where you are and where you want to go, is figuring out, what does the future look like for you? In the past, there's been, the Freedom 55 concept where you work really, really, really hard and then you retire at 55 and you go golf, you go on your cruises, you do all your crazy things. And, many people, if they were able to achieve that, might have realized that by the time they're 55, they might have, missed some great opportunities in those previous years, but just putting their head down and working very, very hard. And, all that joy of going on cruises and vacations, it loses perhaps some of its luster when that's all you're doing. And so one of the cool parts of our world that we're in right now, which is, it's a post-Freedom 55 mindset where it's much harder for people to do that simply because we're living longer. And so the lifespan between 55 and 75 to 85 is a huge number with expenses being so high that it's very hard for a human with an average good salary of living life, raising kids, and saving enough resources to get to the point of 55 where they have enough collected that they can survive for the next 25 years. That's just a reality now that's getting harder to do. The flip side of that, though, is there's an opportunity, and it also maybe offers some comfort for you if you feel like you're like you're too far behind. Is a lot of what gets enjoyable for people in the future is to really figure out what is the enjoyable parts of your business or your job that you enjoy doing, and how could you continue to do that longer? Because I think that is going to be a reality for our wealth in the future, is that we will be working a lot later into our lives. However, we're not going to be working at the same pace. And I certainly have seen it in my own clients over the last 15 years, where I have clients who, once the pressure of reaching a certain amount of money each year to, put their kids through school or pay a certain debt down or have certain investments, once that pressure was gone and, they reduced their workload by 60, 70%, but they really got to enjoy that last 30, 40%, they became so much happier, so much healthier. And in many ways, what they're making in money for that 30, 40% is much greater than 30, 40% of their salary. So that is one of the neat things that we all have ahead of us, is that we probably have a much longer work life in the future than we think. And that is, let me go there. That is good and bad. The good is you have a lot longer and you don't need to get it all done by this conceptual Freedom 55 point in time. At the same time, you need to work on it. Otherwise, you're always, putting your nose to the grindstone for the really big, heavy hours. Once you do have net profits that you're putting into investments, you need to test those investments. And I think a lot of people don't test their investments. They're just really proud that they have some investments set aside. And so much so that I've recently dealt with clients, and I've done this many times, where we're going through the process of confirming their financing to purchase a property. And I'm like, in my brain, I'm like, wow, they have they have two credit cards with rotating consumer debt of, let's say, $40,000. Like, they are paying them the minimal payment. They have really good credit rating, but wow, they have all this consumable debt. And then when talking to them, they also have $100,000 in savings. And it's ironic because the $100,000 in savings gives them so much comfort incorrectly in their brain, because they're like, hey, I have money saved up. I set some money aside, but they're not paying down their credit card, and there's no investments in the world that are going to guarantee a 20% return. And so, although, if they wanted to be really astute with their wealth building and with their debt reduction, that would be an amazing conversation and a different role with them, where it's like, yes, we'd be liquidating half your savings, but liquidating half your savings is instantly making you $500-$600 a month in interest payments that you otherwise wouldn't have to pay. Often the challenge with that, with a lot of humans, is if they don't change their habits, if they don't have a big reason for changing them, a big why, the credit cards get paid off. And then within 2 years, the credit cards are maxed again, right? And so that is, again, coming back to the habits that you have are either serving you or they're holding you back. Part of that as well that I just touched on is paying off the right bills first. And so there are people that are, paying off the wrong bills, the credit cards with the lower amount. They're perhaps saving money when they should just be paying off bills. It's getting really clear on what are things costing you, where's the biggest challenge that you have. If you have a number of different bills or debts that you're looking to pay off and you want to get emotionally rewarded, sometimes even if it's not your highest interest credit card or your highest interest debt, we have seen a lot of success where clients are paying off their lowest bill and putting all their resources in paying off their smallest bill because it gives them a sense of satisfaction that they can like mark off that provincial student debt finally off their wealth tracker, off their net worth tracker, because it's fully paid off, even though that has a lower interest rate versus a credit card. There are situations like that where the emotional reward can be greater than just the simple numbers. And then, investing for the long term. And I mean, now that, I'm in my mid 40s, I can definitely tell you that my biggest mistakes have always been where I've invested for the short term. I've won a couple times, but I've lost many more times than I've won. And had I just put that into, simple dividend paying stocks at the age of 20 and to slowly accumulate it, I'd be much further ahead. And so investing for the long term is fundamental. And even if you feel like you don't have that much of a long runway to be saving, people make way bigger mistakes investing for the short term and going for a gamble. They don't see it as a gamble. They choose to focus on the potential versus the risk of it, but make all your investments as if, and speaking for myself, as if you get hit by a bus and your estate owns it and continues it. Because that way, you know that you've made a safe investment that someone else can inherit and continue versus a gamble. Then once you've gotten to a point where you have paid off your debt, you need to reposition that money out into paying yourself first. It used to be with good rich dad, poor dad that you pay yourself 10% and you end up with a really, really lush Freedom 55 lifestyle. That's no longer mathematically in the number anymore. And so it's very hard to be saving enough to get to that point. However, if you start putting aside 10% off the top of your intake after you've paid off your debt, you are getting into the right direction for putting money aside and making it grow for you. When you get to the point that you're having positive positive net income that you can invest, you have to figure out what's your comfort level. I did mention before, you always want to be investing for the long term, but even in the long term, there are different types of investments and everyone has a different perspective. There's from one extreme side, there's the guaranteed GICs to, in my opinion, gambling with Bitcoin. It doesn't mean that there haven't been tons of millionaires made through Bitcoin, but you always hear about the really big blowups or the people that made a lot of money. You don't hear about all the people that are losing money along the way. And so again, that is important for you to figure out based on what your comfort is, based on what you're looking to achieve, making sure you're realistic with yourself. Avoid trying to do it too fast. Paying off debt or wealth building, it's a marathon. You're not going to get it accomplished quickly and maintain those habits for the long term. You're better off taking longer to do it, but then creating a way of operating and habits that you are able to achieve, repeat results, and do it again and again. Keeping in mind, again, at the next time I present Wealth Building 2.0, we'll go into deeper clarity on all the different investment opportunities that could fall in this range. But in a nutshell, statistically for the last 50 plus years in North America, real estate, depending on where you live, has been almost producing double-digit results, but 6 to 16%. GICs a little while ago, you could get as high as 5%. Dividends and blue chip companies, you can get 4 to 10%, private mortgages. There are so many ways that you can invest, knowing that if you were receiving about 7% return on your investment every 10 years, what you've invested mathematically will double. And so that is kind of the neat things about a long-term investment. 10 years down the road, you wish you had more, more in the game and you're happy with the results. It just takes a long time to get there. So things to remember in this mindset of wealth building is avoid trying to do it fast. It's against our human nature because once we focus on something, we just want the results. But there's really no magical way of doing that other than gambling. Avoid being too lenient with your money, and especially during times that are great. For you, those of you who are salespeople or realtors, I can speak for myself. During the really busy, easy days where it felt like anyone with a t-shirt and a t-shirt and mustard stained t-shirt that was a realtor could make six figures. They were really not holding their money accountable, and they were perhaps spending on things that wasn't as important or needed. And now in a more typical market where things are difficult and you're working at it longer, treat your money the same always. Treat it as if it's hard to get and as if you really earned it and you want to hold it accountable. Build a team of people around you that will hold you accountable as well. So initially, most importantly, is your accountability partner, someone that you can share with and that you can be honest with about the good and the bad. And eventually, a finance coach, accountant, lawyer, etc., a team that's going to help you protect your wealth once you create it. There's so many people that can help you in protecting your wealth and help you, in some ways of creating, but most of the hard work has to come from you generating and comes from you saving in order to invest. Compound interest is, the eighth wonder of the world. It's either going to be your best friend or your worst enemy because it just gets momentum over time and it's hard to catch up, whether it's negative or positive. So at this point, if there's any questions, feel free to ask. And otherwise, I'd say for each of you on here, what might be powerful is just writing down one or two ahas and maybe what your action steps might be in March. Like, what could you do in the next 30 days in the month of March that is going to help your wealth building? And a lot of it comes from establishing the reason, establishing the goals, and then putting a plan forward that is either going to, reduce what you're spending or help you make more money. Any questions from anyone? No? Appreciate you guys all being here. Thank you for that little flasher we had early on. That was the first time for me. And if the slides here or the budgets or the net worth tracker are of value for anyone, just email me and I can share any of those documents with you. And again, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time. And so wealth building is in many ways the same process, and it is available for us all.
I was just going to ask you that question. Do you have copies of the budget sheets, or I guess the one with the three parties, that's the My GPS that works from the
Yes.
MREA. But yeah, thanks. I can't wait for the next one. This is a really good start.
Thanks, Phil. Thank you, team.
Thank you, Roland.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.